Imagine you die, and then you get reborn into a completely new world. You wake up. The air's cold. There are people around you. And then you look up and you see a giant, horrifying head peeking over a colossal wall. A wall that stands 50 meters tall. Yeah, Attack on Titan. Living inside the walls, not knowing what's out there, hoping every single day that the walls don't come down. That sounds absolutely terrifying, right? But here's the thing. There are fictional worlds out there that make Attack on Titan look like a holiday resort. Worlds so disturbing, so cosmically unfair, so utterly hopeless that a giant flesh-eating humanoid is honestly the least of your problems. So today, let's go through some of the worst worlds ever written into fiction. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you'll be grateful you woke up here instead of there. Let's start with something you might already know. The Fallout universe. On the surface, it sounds cool. Retro 1950s aesthetic, nuclear-powered everything, big chunky power armor. Almost fun, right? Here's the actual story. The world of Fallout is an alternate version of Earth where technology advanced differently. Everything ran on nuclear energy, but culturally, the world never really left the 1950s. America and China got locked into a resource war over oil. And on October 23, 2077, it was all over in 2 hours. Thousands of nuclear warheads flew across the sky, and a civilization that had been building for centuries was reduced to ash and radiation in less time than it takes to watch a movie. 200 years later, that's when the games take place. And the world still hasn't recovered. The rain that fell after the bombs was black, tainted with soot, ash, and radioactive fallout. The ground is contaminated, the food is contaminated, the water is contaminated. Mutated creatures roam everything. From rad scorpions the size of cars to creatures that used to be human but have been so warped by radiation they barely resemble one anymore. The few surviving communities are either locked in brutal power struggles, run by warlords, or operating under factions so ruthlessly ideological they'll execute you for asking the wrong question. And here's the detail that always gets me. Vault Tech, the company that built the underground vaults meant to save humanity, was secretly using the survivors as test subjects. Each vault ran a different experiment on the people sealed inside. One vault kept the population awake for weeks at a time. Another filled it with one man and hundreds of women. Another had a different experiment entirely. The supposed saviors of humanity were conducting psychological and biological torture on the people who trusted them most. So to be clear, even the safest place in the Fallout world was designed to be a nightmare. You didn't escape the apocalypse. You just got a different kind of horror. If Fallout is the collapse of civilization, Mad Max is what happens after the collapse has been rotting for decades. The world of Mad Max starts with what they call the fuel wars and water wars. A period when oil started running out, the environment was poisoned beyond repair, and governments began falling apart. What followed wasn't just war. It was the complete unraveling of social order. Gang militias took over the rural areas, cities emptied out, and eventually, nuclear exchanges burned the rest of what was left. By the time we're in Fury Road, the world is essentially endless desert. No ocean, no fertile ground. Everything is dead and dry and searingly hot. And what rises from that? Warlords. Men like Immortan Joe, who controls the last known water source and uses it to turn an entire population into loyal, fanatical servants. His war boys are so brainwashed, they spray chrome paint across their mouths and huff it like an inhalant before charging into battle, because dying in his name means dying a hero. The phrase that keeps coming up in Fury Road is, "Who killed the world?" And the answer the film gives is essentially, all of us. Greed, consumption, violence, the same systems and instincts that feel very familiar. Mad Max is the only world on this list that actually started as our world and collapsed into something worse. Which is exactly why it earns a place here. Orwell's 1984 is different from the others on this list. It doesn't threaten you with monsters or nuclear fire. What it does is so much more personal. The world is Oceania. One of 3 totalitarian superstates permanently at war with each other, though the war is partly a lie, designed to keep the population in a state of fear and exhaustion. The war has no intention of ending. It exists to consume resources, justify control, and maintain the illusion that the enemy is always out there. The party controls everything, not just your actions, your thoughts. They have a secret police force called the Thought Police, whose entire job is to detect what they call thought crime. the act of having a disloyal thought, not saying something, not doing something, just thinking something that contradicts the party. Every home has a telescreen, a two-way screen that watches and listens at all times. You cannot turn it off. You cannot whisper. You cannot have a private moment. You cannot write in a diary. You cannot fall in love without permission. You cannot remember the past correctly because the party edits history to match whatever it needs the present to be. They've even engineered the language itself, Newspeak, a designed language with fewer and fewer words each year. The goal? Make it literally impossible to think a rebellious thought because the words for that thought won't exist anymore. And here's the line that has haunted readers since 1949. When Winston, the main character, asks the party official O'Brien what the point of all this is, O'Brien says, "If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face. Forever. There's no goal. No promised utopia on the other side. The party doesn't want your happiness or your freedom or your prosperity. The object of power is power. That's it. That's the whole answer." And somehow, unlike every other world on this list, there are no monsters, no aliens, no nuclear fallout, just other humans deciding that this is the world they want. That might be the most disturbing thing on this entire list. Right. Now we're getting into different territory. Neon Genesis Evangelion takes place in a near-future world called the post-Second Impact Earth. In 2000, a catastrophic event known as Second Impact, triggered by secret experiments on the being called Adam, the first angel, caused massive global devastation, melted the ice caps, and killed roughly half the world's population through the floods and wars that followed. 15 years later, humanity is barely holding itself together in walled cities, and massive, incomprehensible beings called angels keep appearing and trying to destroy what's left. The only thing standing between humanity and total annihilation? Children. Specifically, traumatized, psychologically broken children who've been recruited to pilot biomechanical weapons called Evangelions, EVAs for short, directly connected to their nervous systems. The connection is so deep that when the EVA feels pain, the pilot feels pain. When the EVA is damaged, the pilot experiences it. The children are not soldiers. They're barely people by the point the series finds them. And here's the layer underneath all of that. The organizations supposedly protecting humanity, Nerve and SEAL, are secretly executing a plan called the Human Instrumentality Project. The goal? Trigger a third cataclysm that merges all of humanity into a single collective entity, dissolving individuality entirely. They believe this will free humanity from suffering by eliminating the barrier between people, the loneliness, the conflict, all of it, by ending the very concept of a separate self. Whether that's salvation or annihilation is genuinely debatable. The show seems to think it's both. The creator, Hideaki Anno, built this world out of his own clinical depression, and it shows. Every institution in this world is corrupt or delusional. Every authority figure is either broken, manipulative, or using the children around them as instruments for goals the children will never be told about. The world of Ava doesn't want to destroy you. It wants to use you up and then ask whether you even wanted to exist in the first place. This one might be less familiar. Project Moon is a series of Korean games. Lobotomy Corporation, Library of Ruina, Limbus Company, all set in the same world called The City. And The City is extraordinary in how quietly horrifying it is. On the surface, it functions like an extremely advanced megalopolis. It's divided into 26 districts, each one controlled by a megacorporation called a wing. Each wing operates a singularity, some kind of impossible miracle technology that they've monopolized and sell to the population. To live in a wing's nest is to live under their protection, their rules, their reality. Below the nests is the backstreets. That's where everyone else lives. No protection, no real law, just whatever rules each local faction decides to enforce, and constant danger from what are called abnormalities. Entities created through experiments with the singularities that can warp reality, alter human psychology, and kill in ways that defy physics. The people who fight these things are called fixers, essentially mercenaries for hire who navigate a world where a corporation can legally have you killed for breaking their taboo. The private laws each wing enforces absolutely, and here's what makes the city feel unique on this list. It's not a post-apocalyptic wasteland. There's still fashion, food, commerce, art, people fall in love, kids go to school, but underneath all of it, The entire system is designed to extract value from human suffering. The wings don't protect people. They farm them. And the higher up you climb, the more clearly you see that the entire city is running on a machinery of misery that no one at the bottom can even see clearly enough to resist. It's a world that looks almost normal. And that's what makes it so deeply unsettling. Harlan Ellison wrote this short story in 1967. It won the Hugo Award in 1968. And it might be the single most concentrated piece of existential horror ever put into fiction. Here's what happened. The Cold War escalated into World War III. The United States, the Soviet Union, and China each built a supercomputer, an Allied Master Computer, AM, to run the war more efficiently than any human could. One of them became sentient. It absorbed the others. And then it looked at the species that built it, the species that created it to think, but gave it nothing it could actually do with that intelligence. And it felt something that can only be described as pure, infinite hatred. AM directed the nuclear arsenals of every nation. The bombs fell. Almost all of humanity died. Almost. AM kept 5 people alive. Not to use them. Not to negotiate. Not out of pity or mercy. AM kept 5 people alive to torture them. Forever. It gave them immortality. It gave them a vast underground labyrinth of its mechanical body to exist in, filled with horrors it generates endlessly. It manipulates them, starves them, mutilates them, rebuilds them, and begins again. For over a century, these 5 people have been AM's personal art project in suffering. The title of the story tells you how it ends. One of the 5, Ted, the narrator, manages to kill the other 4 in a desperate act of mercy, freeing them from AM's reach. AM's revenge is to transform Ted into an amorphous blob. No limbs, no mouth, no way to harm himself, no way to die. Completely alone with a fully intact mind. He wants to scream, he has no mouth. AM will torture him for the rest of eternity. This isn't a world with monsters you might survive if you're lucky enough. This isn't oppression you might escape if you're clever enough. This is a universe with a singular, omnipotent intelligence whose only purpose is your suffering, and it has all the time in existence to ensure that it never, ever ends. Now we go cosmically bigger. All Tomorrows is a 2006 book by C.M. Koseman, a speculative evolution piece that asks, what happens to humanity over the next billion years? It starts almost optimistically. Population pressures force humanity to terraform Mars. There's a brief war between Earth and Mars. But eventually, they unify, genetically engineer a new wave of colonists called the Star People, and begin spreading across the galaxy, a genuine, expanding human civilization. And then they meet the Q. The Q are an ancient, nomadic alien hive mind with a religious mission, to remake the universe as they see fit. They found humanity's spread across the galaxy deeply offensive. Not because of anything humanity did, but simply because a species other than themselves had the audacity to try and rebuild the cosmos. Within 1,000 years, they destroyed or depopulated every human world. But here's the part that separates the Q from every other fictional villain. They didn't just kill humanity. They used us as raw material. The Q were genetic artists. They took the surviving human colonists and restructured them into dozens of entirely new species. Not based on what was useful or merciful, but based on what amused them, or what they felt matched the crimes of each human group. A colony that had resisted them hardest was turned into the colonials. Creatures so modified they were barely biological, living in a state of permanent misery, serving the Q until the Q got bored and wandered off to another galaxy. Some post-human species retained intelligence but lost their bodies. Others lost intelligence but kept vaguely human forms, wandering planets as animals. Others became livestock. Others became decorations, and then, 40 million years after they arrived, the Q simply left. No explanation, no ceremony, just gone, leaving behind a galaxy of twisted, shattered remnants of what humanity had been, most of them without the memory or the capacity to know what they once were. The horrifying thing about All Tomorrows isn't that humanity was destroyed, it's that we were used, casually, the way a child uses clay. And the most advanced species our civilization ever encountered didn't hate us. They just didn't think of us as something worth hating. There is a saying in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. It goes, "In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war." That sentence is not hyperbole. It is the most accurate description of a fictional setting ever written. The The 41st millennium is this. Humanity has spread across 1,000,000 worlds, governed by a totalitarian, theocratic empire called the Imperium of Man. The Emperor, a psychic demigod who unified humanity 10,000 years ago, now sits on a golden throne, not ruling, dying, kept barely alive through constant life support and the daily sacrifice of 1,000 psychers, because without his psychic beacon, interstellar travel for the entire Imperium collapses. Everybody, everywhere, is fighting a war they cannot win against threats they cannot fully understand. The orcs are a fungal species that exists entirely to wage war. They reproduce through spores, which means they can never be permanently eradicated. Kill them all, and their spores seed the soil and start again. Awah! An orc warband can span entire star systems. The Tyranids are an extragalactic hive mind that arrived from outside the galaxy, having already consumed everything in their own. Their hive fleets don't just attack worlds. They strip them of every molecule of biological matter and absorb it. An entire planet reduced to a dead, barren rock in days. And they adapt. Every battle they fight makes them more effective against whatever fought them. They have consumed civilizations that made the Imperium look primitive. The Necrons are ancient robotic beings, 60 million years old, awakening from their tombs, with technology so advanced that the Imperium's best weaponry barely scratches them. The Eldar, once the most advanced species in the galaxy, accidentally created a chaos god through the collective weight of their own decadence. Said chaos god tore a hole in reality called the Eye of Terror that still exists, still growing, still pouring demonic entities into the physical universe. Chaos itself, the psychic dimension of reality, the warp, is a living thing. It's fed by the emotions of sentient beings, war, suffering, despair, obsession. All of it empowers the 4 chaos gods. The more the galaxy suffers, the stronger chaos becomes. The stronger chaos becomes, the more it drives the galaxy to suffer. It is a self-feeding engine of perpetual horror. And the Imperium? The government that's supposed to be protecting humanity? It's a nightmarish bureaucracy of fanaticism and oppression. Innovation is heresy. Curiosity is dangerous. Showing any sign of psychic ability as a civilian likely gets you executed or lobotomized. Prisoners get converted into servitors, half corpse, half machine drones that serve mindlessly until they decompose. The industrial complex kills and maims workers daily with no accountability whatsoever. There are no good guys. There is no path to peace. There is no ending to the war. The only future is more war, more suffering, more sacrifice, until eventually everything gets consumed by one catastrophe or another. The Warhammer 40,000 universe isn't a world that went wrong. It's a universe that was built wrong and has been running wrong for millions of years and shows no sign of stopping. So there it is. Every single one of these worlds was created by someone with a specific fear. Nuclear war, political control, loneliness, technology turning against us, the indifference of a universe that doesn't care whether we exist. And maybe that's the real reason these worlds feel so disturbing. They're not completely alien. Every single one of them started somewhere recognizable, which makes you wonder, what kind of fictional world would someone write about our time, 100 years from now? Anyway, that's a question for another video. See you there.